Hi guys! Happy October! I'm so excited. It's finally Halloween season. I was actually already technically there mentally back in September, but now it's finally here and I couldn't be more excited. We're gonna make an apple pear pie today, but we're gonna make it spooky. We're gonna do that by adding some eyeballs on top of the pie crust. Now to make this pie, the ingredients list might seem kind of extensive, but some of the ingredients do repeat. So for this recipe, you'll need 5 medium ripe pears. You can use any kind, use your favorite kind, it doesn't really matter. 3 medium apples, preferably tart apples, but I am even choosing to use Honeycrisp apples in this recipe. I was just kind of curious how the pie would turn out, and it's what I had on hand. If you do want to use a tart apple, the best apple you can use is the green Granny Smith apples. 3/4 a cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, a half a tablespoon of lemon juice, freshly squeezed, 2 teaspoons to 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon, I always use a tablespoon, 1/4 a teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 a teaspoon of clove, 3 tablespoons of butter, 1 egg, slightly beaten, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1/4 a teaspoon of cinnamon, some fresh wild blueberries, and of course we'll need some pie crust dough, which if you want to use my recipe, and of course I recommend it, you can find that video here. So in making this pie, the goal is to make it spooky. So we're going to do some solid black eyes, and how we're going to do that is we're going to gouge some circles out of the pears, and then we're going to let it sit in the wild blueberries, and it's going to dye it. But first, we need to go ahead and mash up those wild blueberries. Obviously you can see it has some liquid already in there, and that's great, but we want to get a little bit more out of it. So I'm just going to use a potato masher, and we're just going to mash it a bit more and hope it doesn't get on us. And you can go ahead and leave the little pieces of blueberries in there, it won't bother anything. You can see that after mashing the blueberries, there is significantly more juice in the bowl. So now it's time to start gouging the pears. So I'm going to use just a melon baller for that. If you don't have one of these, you can try to use a knife or maybe a spoon. I'm not sure how well that'll work. So usually on a melon baller, you'll have 2 different sizes. I'm going to use the bigger size. I'm literally just going to gouge the pear, circled melon baller, just like you would a melon, and we're going to create these little pretty circles. Okay, so here's my eyeball, and I actually have a seed in it, so I need to get that out. Don't leave the seeds in there. Make sure you take those out if you have some. So now we have our little eyeball that doesn't have a seed in it. It's okay to leave the skin on there. It won't bother the design at all. So now we're just gonna place the little pear eyeball in the juice of the blueberries, and we're just gonna let it sit there and soak in that color. So now we're just going to keep doing that until we make however many eyeballs that we want for our pie, and we're just going to put them all into the blueberry juice. So here I have my eyeballs. I haven't mixed them up yet in the juice, but I have about 7 eyeballs. Now we're going to go ahead and set this aside. Just make sure you kind of stir it around a little bit while we're preparing the rest of the pie, just to make sure that the pear eyeballs are getting fully coated in that wild blueberry juice. Now that we have the eyeballs soaking, we're going to go ahead and peel both the pears and the apples. And of course, it's okay if you can't get all the skin off. Now we have both the apples and the pears peeled. Now with the leftover scraps from the skins, do not throw them away. They make awesome and tasty little fruit chips. All you have to do is lightly coat them in coconut oil or butter and spread them on a baking sheet and stick them in the oven at 170 degrees Fahrenheit until they're dry and crisp. See, look, you're getting 2 recipes in one video. Happy Halloween, that's a treat. Now we're gonna go ahead and thinly slice both the pears and the apples. You can see they're pretty thin. They're maybe 1/4 of an inch, but probably less than that even. All I did was cut the apple in half, which I'm gonna do the same with the pears. Cut it in half, and then cut the half in half, cut the core out, and then just start thinly slicing. Now we have all of our fruit sliced up. We're gonna go ahead and transfer it to a bowl. We're now gonna add to the pears and apples the brown sugar, cornstarch, lemon juice, cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove. The lemon juice I'm simply just guesstimating on. There's a seed. And I forgot to mention, we will also need 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You can use whatever salt you like. I'm using pink Himalayan salt. Now we're gonna go ahead and just combine these ingredients with the apples and pears. But first, let's check on the eyeballs. So here they are. Let's see what it's looking like. It's looking pretty good. Okay, now let's stir it and hopefully it all stays in the bowl. Now that we got it all evenly coated, we're gonna go ahead and set it aside and let those pears and apples start soaking up that flavor from the spices. And we're gonna move on to the crust. So hopefully you've let your dough sit outside the fridge on the counter for at least 30 minutes, just so it's a little bit easier to roll out. And you'll also wanna get some extra flour for dusting the surface. I'm gonna unwrap the dough and we're gonna split it in half because we're gonna need a top crust and a bottom crust. And my pie crust recipe makes 2 single crust pies or 1 double crust pie. And what we're making today is a double crust pie. Okay, once you've guillotined your pie crust dough, go ahead and set 1/2 to the side. I'm gonna shape it into a ball and then we're gonna go ahead and start rolling it out. Now that we got the pie crust rolled out, we're gonna go ahead and transfer it to the pie pan. Here I have my pie pan that's been generously greased with butter. I'm gonna go ahead and just trim the edges. And make sure you save the extra dough because we need it for the eyeballs. Now we're gonna go ahead and pour the fruit mixture into the pie pan and we're gonna dot it with the butter. And remember I said 3 ounces of butter, which that's equivalent to 3/4 a stick of butter. And by dot, I simply mean to just place it around the top of the pie. And this is what it should look like so far. And now we're gonna go ahead and roll out the other half of the pie crust to place on top. Same thing, I'm just gonna go ahead and trim the edges. And once again, save the extra dough. And I went ahead and just sealed the edges. Now we're gonna start working on the eyeballs. I'm just gonna work the dough back into a ball and then we're gonna start rolling it out. We want it about the same thickness as the pie crust. You can even make it a little bit thinner. We've got our dough rolled out and now let's check on the eyeballs again. They're looking really good. If you want a super rich color, you can even let it sit overnight. But we're gonna take these out and we're gonna keep the juice because after it bakes, if we want it even darker, we can go ahead and brush more of the juice over it. Now we're gonna go ahead and start cutting out the eyelids. To do that, we're gonna cut little dome shapes, and then we're gonna kind of make it look like it's in between a half moon and a crescent moon. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's kind of hard for me to explain. So I am gonna use this as kind of a guide, and then I'm also gonna use a really sharp knife. So I'm just gonna take it and roll it in the dough, and then I'll finish cutting out the eyelid with the knife. And then I'm just gonna kind of go straight and then kind of just curve up a little bit. And of course, don't worry about them being perfect because once we get them on the eyeball, we are gonna mold it to the way that we want it. And of course, the extra dough is still great to save. This will probably be a quiche in the morning. You see, this is kind of the shape I was talking about. Before we do anything else, we're gonna go ahead and put the egg wash on this part of the crust. We're just gonna lightly beat the egg and spread it across the crust. We just wanna kind of glaze it. You most likely will not use the whole egg, and you probably shouldn't. And now we're gonna go ahead and sprinkle it with that 1 teaspoon of sugar and 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And this is what it looks like now. Now for the fun part we've all been waiting for, we're gonna start adding the eyeballs. To do that, I'm gonna use the sharp knife to cut just like a little lip or eye socket into the pie in order to stick the eyeball in there. And you can just sporadically put the eyeballs in whatever arrangement you like. Before I put the eyeball in, I'm gonna show you kind of what I'm talking about. I cut like a U shape into it, and then it just kind of lifts up like an eyelid, but then we're gonna add our other eyelids on top just to make it look a little bit nicer. Now I am just gonna get all the eyeballs into the pie, and then I'll start shaping them how I want. I got all the eyeballs in the pie, and this is my random arrangement that I did. And now we're just gonna start putting the eyelids on. But first, we're gonna shape these little eye sockets, I guess you could call them, kind of around the eyeball, just so it looks a little bit more uniform by the time we get the eyelids on. To do that, I'm just literally just gonna mold it around the eyeball. I'm tucking the eyeball under a little bit, just kind of looks like a lazy, droopy eye. And then just molding it around the eyeball. And now with clean hands, I'm just gonna start molding our eyelids onto the eyeballs. Just kind of stretching it out a little bit just to make it a little bit easier to work with. And before we put it on, we wanna just kind of brush the area we're putting it on a little bit with the egg wash. It just helps it stick a little bit. And just lightly press that dough into the top pie crust. And here's what it looks like. And we'll just go ahead and do that to all the other eyes. And here you see I have all the eyeballs in place in the pie. Now that we got all our eyeballs in place, we're gonna go ahead and lightly cover the top with aluminum foil. But first, I am gonna add just a little bit of the blueberry juice into the corners of the eyes, hoping that it gives me the bleeding effect. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we're gonna try it. Now we're gonna go ahead and cover it with the aluminum foil. We just want to lightly cover it. It's just protecting the crust. I like to get mine to kind of dome up a little bit so it's not touching the pie. And now we're going to stick this in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes covered. Once that 30 minutes is up, we're going to take the aluminum foil off and cook it for an additional 30 to 35 minutes. But of course, as always, watch your pie and make sure it's not burning, because time can vary for many reasons. Here we have our pie, and the eyeballs are pretty dark, which is really good. A tip to getting really dark, pigmented, black colored eyeballs, of course they are gonna have like a purplish bluish tint, because we are going all natural with this, not using any edible paints or anything like that. But to get that really rich blackish pigment, we want to continue to apply that blueberry juice every 5 minutes roughly while it's in the oven. And of course, soaking those pear eyeballs overnight helps immensely. All we're gonna do now is pipe 2 different details onto the eyes with white frosting or white icing. We're gonna add a little water line and kind of give it the whites of the eye, and then we're gonna add just a little glistening dot on the eye. Just like that. And here we have our finished spooky apple pear pie. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future content. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave those below in the comments section. Bye y'all.